entitled, Alicia's going to try to not be a straight-up brat. That's not probably what's going to be titled, but...
Subtitle.
Subtitle. It won't even show, though. Like, when you go to click, it'll probably only show the... If you put too much, just won't... Yeah. Oh, well. Today, I don't want to talk about the people who say they love Jesus but hate church. I want to talk about the people who want to rebuke the people who say that they love Jesus but hate church. And
or at least some of them.
And it is my rant more than yours.
Well, I have related rants, so
yeah.
I'm sure we'll hit on some related rants.
Or you can be my rant wingman.
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see. Okay, I think if you don't know what people are talking about when they say that they love Jesus but hate church, just go read one of the, I'm sure, like 2,000 articles online about what people say about it. The very first thing I think you have to talk about when you talk about this subject, before you try to make an argument, you have to define what you mean when you say the word church. Because for Christians, there is, or should be, two uses of the word church, at least two. There is the church, when the Bible talks about the church being the bride of Christ. That is the entire collective of all believers and followers of Jesus Christ. And then we also use the word church completely interchangeably with our individual 501c3 or however you're organized organizations. We don't have a separate word for that. Like, the church is the body of believers across the world, and the church, for a lot of people, can be their particular Baptist congregation, Methodist congregation.
Or Baptist collectively, or Methodists collectively.
Yeah, or denominations. So when you talk about this, you have to explain in the argument what word you're using for church, because it's a completely different thing to say that you love Jesus but hate believers, or to say you love Jesus but you reject any particular organization. Those are completely different things to say, even though some people somehow don't think that they're completely separate. Mm-hmm. And you have to make your decision separately on what you think about those two things. I have all kinds of the notes. I asked Lark and Gabe if they thought it was a bad idea for me to talk a little bit about what made me think about this more. It led to me thinking about this. And that's something that happened with our denomination. And Gabe was like, I don't think that's bad to think about or talk about. But
I don't think it's bad to talk about either, as long as it doesn't turn into, like, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because it gives background on why.
Yeah, and explains a little bit of what I have to say about me in the church. Mm-hmm. In our denomination, there might have been a lot of congregations where to be an official local member, you had to be an official conference member, denomination member, but it was
like be registered with
be registered
denomination's headquarters,
mm-hmm. And agree to believe and uphold the doctrines and teachings of the church. In the congregation I go to, we didn't require that. You could have local membership. It did not require conference membership. Well, at the last general conference that they just had, they redid the conferences, which is the larger organization. They redid their bylaws, and now they put in there that for an affiliated local church to allow people to be members in their church, which members just means they don't mean to come to church attendance. They mean to hold an office or vote. You have to have conference membership in order for an affiliated church to give you local membership, which has a big impact on my little church, because 2 of our board members and one of only 2 elders and myself are not conference members and have no plans to be conference members and are, philosophically and religiously opposed to becoming. So it has a big impact on our church. And so I was trying to understand why they wanted to make this change, because I don't think it's a power grab. I think it's just a big difference in the philosophy.
Yeah, you don't think it's a power grab.
No, I don't think it's a power grab. I think it's just a big difference in philosophy between how I think the church should be run and how they think the church should be run, and what the word church should mean. So that's what made me think about this.
The nature of commitment.
Yeah. And what the church needs to be protected from or not protected from. So I was trying to figure out, like, why do they want this? Are they trying to protect the organization, trying to make sure that doctrine is more homogenous? Are they afraid that they're harboring people who are let coast without committing, even though you can write down on a piece of paper that you're a conference member and never commit to a damn thing?
If it's not important to you, it's really easy to decide that piece of paper whether it's true or not.
Yeah, actually. Yeah. And then I thought, well, you know, I have been seeing more and more conversations where people are trying to nip in the bud or address or rebuke people who have this idea that they could be a follower of Jesus but not be a part of a church. And I thought, well, maybe maybe part of this is a reaction to the fact that that's getting more and more prevalent in the culture. Maybe they're trying to force the issue of saying, we're not okay with you saying that you love Jesus but hate the church. You need to say that you're part of the church to be part of the... I don't know. That's what made me really start thinking about this, because I'm getting, you know, in 3 years' time when it has to be implemented, I'm going to be very limited in how I can serve in my church. Yeah. Anyway, let's go through some notes. So, I mean, we have some questions to ask and talk about. Do Christians have to go to church? Does loving the church mean? Is loving the church the same thing as attending a weekly service at a human organization? These are things. Do you think Christians have to go to church?
I think that, I think Christians do need to be connected and involved with other Christians. And I think that attending a church is a really easy way to do that. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, it's already set up. You just have to go and meet people.
Yeah.
You know, like, relatively speaking, you don't have to do any path forging to do that.
You don't have to go find them. Everybody knows that if you go there,
it's there.
We'll be there. Yeah.
It's just there. So I think it's helpful, but I haven't gone to church my entire Christian life, and some of those periods were like spiritually difficult periods where, you know, it was like ebb tide anyway. But not all of them were. Some of them, things were going, you know, okay, and it was just, I just wasn't going there. Well, yeah. And then you get into definitions of church, because I mean, like, do you call visions a church? Some people do, some people would not. It was a ministry that had held services. It wasn't like a church, but they still had services, so I'd be at those. Bottom line is, no, I don't think it's like necessary, but I think often it's helpful.
Yeah. And I love church, and I go to church
sometimes
almost all the time. I'm involved with my church. It's not like I don't think it's good. I think it's been like...
Yeah, you're way more involved in church.
I think it's super beneficial, that varying depending on the congregation, but I love church. One of the big verses that people use, but they kind of just use the phrase, do not neglect, is from Hebrews. This is Paul giving advice to a church or a bunch of believers. Don't forsake, it says not forsaking, but not forsaking our own assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So people love that phrase, you know, well, I think I printed a version where it doesn't say, but one of the versions says, like, not neglecting meeting together with he's telling them, like, don't neglect the meetings that you have with each other. Those are basically house churches.
Yeah.
And or communes.
People
use that verse, and it always irks me, because a lot of times I feel like, well, people have this conversation and they'll make all these good points about how, like, you know, Jesus has such a passion for the church. The church is Jesus' bride. You can't hate the church and love Jesus. And then I always want to be like, yeah, but it's not fair to put your finger on any particular human organization and then make it mean the same thing and tell people, no, you can't love Jesus and hate my church. No, you can't make one be the other. That's like telling all the people who were molested by priests that if you love Jesus, you will still go to that church and love it. I'm sorry. If I ever found out that COG 7 was harboring or enabling child molestation, unless every single person who was in authority while it was going on, innocent or guilty, stepped down and all of the places were changed to let us feel like maybe we had taken care of the entire problem, I would not be a part of this organization, and I do not think that would mean that I hate the church. Mm-hmm. It's just that, organizations are made up of people, and sometimes they're super corrupt. It's okay to leave that. You can leave that in the dust. It's okay. So, I mean, what he was talking about, he might have been talking about in a city, there might have been like a few hundred believers. In other cities, there might have been 20. And maybe they did, maybe some of them did by this point, but a lot of them didn't have a building that they owned and overhead costs. And
well, if they did, it wasn't legal.
Yeah, and pastors who that was their full-time job and they didn't have day jobs or support themselves some other way. What he was talking about, the meetings he was talking about, were so much different than what most of the churches that we have, that to just say all of a sudden, like, well, Paul told them not to neglect meeting together, so if you don't show up every Sabbath morning or every Sunday morning, then you are sinning. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm getting worked up, so I'm not making my points very well.
The other part of that verse that always made me think when I wasn't going to church, and now too, is, what is it? Where is it again?
It starts at the beginning. Consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembling together.
Yeah.
As is the habit of some.
There are phases of your life sometimes where going to church is the most discouraging thing that you can do. And I was like, okay, so you're going to encourage and be encouraged. That is not happening, whether I'm there or not.
Yeah.
So really, when I would come home and just feel like so drained and disappointed and alienated, it was like, is this really doing the good that this verse is clearly intending to make happen? And there are a lot of times where I was just like, I don't think it is.
And it is so possible and maybe even prevalent to attend church every week, but be neglectful of any kind of meaningful, intimate relationship with other people at church.
It's really easy. And to still feel like you've done...
The way church is set up, it almost facilitates it. Yeah. It's completely possible to neglect any kind of personal relationship with anybody else in that church, but feel like you met with other believers while you sat silently and listened to a pastor. I mean, most people build friendships at church. But it's up to you to go do that at church, So for my part, I make a huge differentiation between the church, which means everyone who believes and depends on Jesus to save them from their sins, and any particular church, human organization that is set up to worship God, but is set up in a very human-decided way. God did not, Jesus didn't tell the people, like, you will make sure that you own a building and everything in there will be owned by the church, and you will give 1/10 of your money to that organization, and you will be exempt from taxes, and you will have one person stand up and preach for an hour once a week. None of those things are bad, but we decided to set it up that way. That's what we made.
Did you see the Phil Vischer podcast with Francis Chan?
No!
I found it tremendously convicting because it's basically impossible to be part of their church and not engaged, and they do it with no overhead.
Because he does nothing but house churches now, right? Yeah.
And I was like, this is really convicting because I'm going to church again, but I don't know that I'm actually, like, quote unquote, in community. Like, I have friendships, but I don't feel like I'm not engaged the way you have to be engaged to be part of that church.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know.
And I guess I do think when you have this conversation and you're on the side of saying people who say they love Jesus but hate church, you know, they're sinning and they're spoiled. If you're on that side of the conversation and you really do think that when it says don't neglect meeting together, it means it's a sin for someone to not go to a church building once a week. If that's what you really think church is, if you think the body of believers and your church organization are the same thing, then there's no point in me even talking about this to you.
It's a foundational philosophical
it's such
difference.
A big difference. And then, yeah, so a lot of this debate is over semantics. And you know, I was about the people who usually say that, if you bother, who say that they love Jesus but reject church, if you bother to think about the reasons that they're leaving, because most of these people, they are not leaving because the pastor wasn't animated enough.
I don't think
I've
not
ever met leaving because the praise worship wasn't good enough.
I've known a fair number of people and been one, and I don't think that was ever. I don't think I've ever heard that as a reason.
It's not just because they weren't handed spirituality over for free.
If that's your reason, you're not leaving church, you're changing churches.
Yeah.
If you're looking for just a different kind of church experience, you're not going to stop going to church.
You're
going to look for a different church.
To just call them spoiled and self-centered, I don't feel like you're taking the time to actually ask them, like, why are you leaving church? Because for a lot of these people, especially if they're millennials, I think it's because they have already sensed the rejection the church had for them. I'm sure that any church you walk into will let you attend church. But if you dress like a hipster and you smoke and you vote Democrat and you think God created the world through evolution, and I think I had other examples. Like, there are things that can be very okay, but it will still keep churches from really letting you get in on the ministry because they think you're wrong. And there are times where it's good to tell somebody they can't be part of a ministry. I mean, Paul told them, you know, you need to refuse that guy who's sleeping with his stepmom because that's not okay.
Because dag, you know.
Yeah, that's not okay. But there are a lot of people who left church because they saw that attending was as far as it was ever going to get because of who they are and what they believe in.
I did notice that Val and I came back to church as soon as the election year was over. And I was like, I wonder if that's a coincidence or...
So if the people who are leaving are a demographic that you would not let teach or hold an office, or if you don't want them voting in your church...
Or if you just don't want them talking about what they actually believe.
Yeah, if you don't think anything they say is... If you think it's dangerous and not legitimate and even
if you want to make sure they're shut down to say those things.
Yeah, if you reject them and then you don't understand why they say that they aren't going to stay in your church, like, are you crazy?
Well, I think a lot of people... I think the general opinion would be that if you're believing those things, that you're... That you're in rebellion.
That you are rejecting Jesus?
Yeah, that you're in rebellion and that therefore, it's not...
That's a whole
conversation. I remember, I've had this conversation with Mom so many times about, because our mom is so cool. She, Mom is like the greatest undercover... I think Mom's the only actually original person I know. She just is what she is, and she's not going to throw it in your face, but if you know her, she's going to be like, yeah, this is what I believe, and it's not what you would expect from somebody that looks like my mom. But, I have this conversation with her about how, I feel guilty about not being conservative, because I'm not liberal either, but I'm definitely not conservative. And I feel guilty about that, because there's a lot of social and religious pressure to be conservative. She's like, honey, no, that's fine. Mom is so cool. Even though she is conservative, she's just like, no, there's lots of all these different things are fine. This is just differences in ideas. It's okay.
And I am pretty, I don't know, libertarian. So it's not liberal.
No.
I'm not liberal by a long shot.
It's not like normal conservative either, though.
But it's not normal conservative either. But anyways.
Anyway, no.
One of the other things that I was thinking about today about like reasons people decided they're going to reject church is that so many churches have like so many problems and such a like toxic culture, and not everybody is ready and strong enough to engage that and try to work with it and save it. Not everybody is strong enough to try to save church. And so if you're in a church that is going bad places and harboring like hatred and racism, and you aren't strong, like how can somebody fault you for being a babe in Christ who isn't ready to be part of a church where those things need to be corrected?
Or if you are a strong Christian and you've been fighting that fight for a long time, and I'm not talking about myself here, and you've been fighting that
we like
fight,
our churches.
And you've been fighting that fight a long time and just see, you know, that you're not going to win, you know, that it's not going to go anywhere. You know, it doesn't have to be weakness to give up that fight. Sometimes you just acknowledge, nope, the ship's going down.
I will agree that if you love Jesus and you follow Jesus and the Bible and what he says, sooner or later you're going to come to the point where you do recognize that you need to be devoted to the church as a whole and to the mission of the church and to the health of the church, and which means other believers you have contact with.
Mm-hmm.
If you really,
in some iteration. If
you really follow Jesus, and at some point I do agree that you will come to love other believers and see that you are commanded to love other believers. He says it all the time, that the world's gonna know you because you're gonna love each other. Mm-hmm. So I command you to love each other. It's not like I say that's not true, but it's not the same thing as putting down on paper that you're